All right, we've got some major breaking news. Late last night and early this morning, Vice President J.D. Vance took to Twitter to argue with people about the Maryland father who was deported with zero due process and who had temporary protected status, meaning he was not supposed to be removed from the country, yet the Trump administration still did and said it was a, quote, administrative error. Now, the most egregious part is, while this father is sitting in a dangerous prison in El Salvador, and while his 5-year-old kid with a disability is waiting for him to come home, J.D. Vance is lying about him online. I mean, the dude can't defend himself. He doesn't have a Twitter at this moment. So J.D. Vance is misrepresenting his previous cases. He is now saying that the admin was justified, even though they just said it was an error. And I want to break all of this down, plus how J.D. Vance basically just edited a tweet after he realized he was completely wrong. Before I even jump in, let me just tell you, J.D. Vance lies in about 6 different ways in these posts, but we'll make sure we fact check all of it. If you appreciate what I do, make sure you scroll down, drop a like, and let's start from the beginning. So yesterday, The Atlantic dropped a story. It says, exclusive, the Trump admin has acknowledged that it grabbed a Maryland father with protected status and mistakenly deported him to El Salvador. But it claims the courts are powerless to order his return, which is a whole different story that is scary. But then J.D. Vance took to Twitter and began to mock Jon Favreau, who works with Pod Save America. Now, Jon Favreau said, any comment on this, Marco Rubio? How about you, J.D. Vance or Elon Musk? You just admitted to accidentally sending an innocent father from Maryland to a torture dungeon, is what Jon Favreau is saying in this tweet below. J.D. Vance then responds and says, my comment is that according to the court document you apparently didn't read, he was a convicted MS-13 gang member with no legal right to be here. Wrong. False. J.D. Vance is lying. He then says, my further comment is that it's gross to get fired up about gang members getting deported while ignoring citizens they victimize. But the thing is, while J.D. Vance mocks Jon Favreau, Vance clearly didn't read the court document. So then journalist Kyle Cheney responds and says, Vance here, mocking Jon Favreau for not reading the court filing, says the deported man was a, quote, convicted gang member. The court filing does not say that. It doesn't say that anywhere. In fact, all of the court filings say the exact opposite. He was denied bond in 2019 over an informant's claim he was MS-13. That is not a conviction, and the judge ended up saying he's not MS-13. He can have temporary protected status. This says, let's read the court document while we have it here. I mean, Plaintiff Garcia is a citizen and native of El Salvador, and his co-plaintiffs are his U.S. citizen wife and 5-year-old child who reside in Maryland. In March of 2019, Garcia was served notice to appear in removal proceedings, charging him as, quote, inadmissible as an alien present because they thought he was a part of MS-13. Garcia then filed an application for asylum and withholding of removal, and although he was found removable, the immigration judge granted him withholding of removal to El Salvador, saying, hey, you are temporarily protected here, and it's been like that ever since. So the key takeaway is that when J.D. Vance says he was a convicted MS-13 gang member, J.D. Vance is lying right here. He's lying, and that's the thing. When there's no due process, when that's stripped away, Garcia, the dude who was deported, never had a chance to even defend himself. But it gets worse, because J.D. Vance then tweets something out early this morning and then changes it because you can now edit tweets. And I want to break down what he tweeted before and what he changed. So again, let me just reiterate, when you don't give someone due process, they don't have the chance to show that, hey, they have temporary protected status. Hey, I'm not a gang member. You know what's actually cool is that the court filing from 2019 shows the system working as intended. In 2019, there was still due process, apparently. So when Garcia went into court, he presented his case, and the judge said, wait a minute, this dude actually has a very compelling case. He should not be removed. I'm going to give him temporary protected status. That is the system working as intended. You show your evidence, and the judge or the jury, they make a decision. So early this morning, J.D. Vance tweeted out, Kyle Cheney, a legal affairs reporter, is apparently unable or unwilling to look at the facts here. So let's look at what facts J.D. Vance wants to present. And let me remind you, when he says Kyle Cheney, a legal affairs reporter, he's referring to the dude who wrote this previous tweet. If you look up at the top of the screen up there, that's Kyle Cheney, and it says senior legal affairs reporter for Politico. So he's the one that said JD Vance didn't even read the court filing. And that pissed JD Vance off so much that he decided to respond to Kyle Cheney. Now, before I read this, I'm going to give a little bit of a hot take that people will disagree with. I actually think it's okay if elected officials want to argue with people online. Not like this. JD Vance does it in a very condescending, abrasive way. He does it a little bit too much. JD Vance is arguing with people basically on a daily basis. But I have seen Democratic politicians like AOC do this in a perfect way. One time, Elon Musk was spreading disinformation on Twitter, as he always does. This was about 6 months back. And AOC quote tweeted it, responded, and she got more likes and views than Elon Musk. So if you hear me out, I think that politicians, even if JD Vance wants to have his voice heard, I think it's okay if they post on social media. It's a little bit more candid and raw than these really pre-written posts. So again, the problem isn't even that JD Vance is responding, it's that he's lying, being condescending, removing due process, subverting the Constitution. There are a lot of problems here, and the debate in our democracy is like the least of the problems. So, JD Vance says, Kyle Cheney, a legal affairs reporter, is apparently unable or unwilling to look at the facts here. In 2019, an immigration judge under the Biden administration determined that the deported man was in fact a member of an MS-13 gang. Okay, let's just stop right here. First of all, JD Vance says that he's going to look at the facts. And then he claims that in 2019, an immigration judge under the Biden administration, just think about this. Who was the president in 2019 in the pre-COVID era? JD Vance is already getting his facts wrong. He said under the Biden admin, he meant under the Trump admin. Okay, maybe that was just a mistake. But then he says that the judge determined he was a member of an MS-13 gang. That is not the claim that JD Vance originally made. JD Vance originally claimed he was a convicted MS-13 gang member. He was not convicted anywhere, so JD Vance is already backpedaling. He then says, he also apparently had multiple traffic violations for which he failed to appear in court. A real winner. I'm sorry, is JD Vance arguing that because of failed traffic violations, he deserved to get deported to a really dangerous prison in El Salvador? JD Vance says, it's telling that the entire American media is going to run a propaganda operation today, making you think an innocent father of three was apprehended by a gulag. Here are the relevant facts. And before we dig into JD Vance's facts, which we shouldn't trust, he just got everything wrong. He got everything wrong. He doesn't even know who was the president in 2019. This was not a convicted gang member, so JD Vance is contradicting himself right here. When he says the American media is going to run a propaganda operation, my read is that's panic. He's trying to obfuscate and project before this becomes a nationwide story. And trust me, it will. You remember the gay hairstylist who was deported about a week ago? If you thought that was a big story, wait until people hear about the father of three with a disabled 5-year-old who was deported without due process and who had temporary protected status. So JD Vance is currently defending the indefensible right now, and that's why he's getting so many facts wrong. So then, an hour after posting this tweet, JD Vance makes an edit to it. On Twitter, you can edit a tweet, and then it updates, and it shows you the old post, which is how I had access to the old tweet. But in the new post, he makes some changes. He then says the same thing about Kyle Cheney, blah, 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 but then he changes this. He says, in 2019, an immigration judge under the Trump administration, ooh, that's a dirty deletion right there. He changes the tweet. And then he says the same thing about it is telling the American media is going to run a propaganda operation. Here are the facts that JD Vance lays out that we will fact check. He says, 1, the man is an illegal immigrant with no right to be in our country. Well, he did have temporary protected status, so a judge granted him the right to not be removed. It's just wrong. You're wrong, JD Vance. He then says, an immigration judge determined he was a member of the MS-13 gang. Not exactly right. An informant claimed he was, but the judge said it was murky and he was never convicted. 3, because he is not a citizen, he does not get a full jury trial by peers. In other words, whatever due process he was entitled to, he received. That is also just so incredibly wrong. Even if he doesn't get a full jury trial by peers, not everybody gets that every single time, he does get to present his argument in court. He does get to present his case, or at least have some sort of grace period where it's like, hey, you can present all of your evidence, and then if we think that you were dangerous, we'll send you to the prison. But he didn't get any of that. He didn't get any due process. Honestly, These are some of the weakest arguments I've heard JD Vance make. And of course, he directly quote tweets Kyle Cheney, and then he responds, edited the original post because 2019 was during the Trump admin, not the Biden admin. All right, I mean, if you want to say that's a simple mistake, whatever. I'm not going to give JD Vance any charitability. So then, friend of the show, Pisco, responds, and he comes out swinging. He says, "You are a lying fuck. You said he was a convicted MS-13 gang member. He is not. Retract that claim. The determination made at the bail hearing was based on his clothing. Hearsay that not even the cops believed, and a blatantly false report. He won his withholding claim." And then read this. "My comment is that according to the court document you apparently didn't read, he was a convicted MS-13 gang member." That's the first tweet we read from JD Vance at the beginning of the video. But then we read the court filing, and it says, "The only reason that they believed Plaintiff Garcia was a gang member was that he was wearing a Chicago Bulls hat and a hoodie, and that a confidential informant advised he was an active member of MS-13. The GFIS had been entered into the database approximately 4 hours. According to the Department of Justice and the District Attorney's Office, the Westerns Click operates in a state that Garcia has never even lived in." And then if we continue to read, it says, "The respondent contends that the form in his case erroneously states he was detained in connection to a murder investigation." So they're lying about him even further. And then it says, "On August 9th of 2019, the attorney for ICE indicated on the record that ICE had conferred with its law enforcement partners and that all the evidence and intelligence they had was contained in the GFIS. As a result, the subpoena was deemed unnecessary." So again, the cops don't even think that he is a gang member, which is absolutely wild. We're never going to see JD Vance retract his statement from last night, calling him a convicted gang member. That was a lie. He's never going to retract it. We're never going to see JD Vance correct the record. Honestly, it's silly for me to even say JD Vance would think about correcting the record. What he's doing here is purposefully obfuscating because he knows the Trump admin is in deep shit. Can I just point out that last Monday, the Signalgate scandal dropped, and now 7 days later, it's gotten even worse. Now, Kyle Cheney, the reporter who was attacked, he made an interesting point that I kind of empathize with. He said, "I give the VP credit for doing his own tweets and hope mistakes like this, which can happen. We aren't operating in a totally scripted environment. I hope they don't make him engage less. We could all use a little more grace towards each other." Now, I disagree that JD Vance needs more grace. I totally disagree there. But I do agree with the fact that when you're writing your own tweets, you are bound to make mistakes. And hey, maybe us having more candid dialogue is better than JD Vance sending this and having 4 different people proofread it and fact check. Maybe you should have some people proofread it as the Vice President of the United States. But yeah, making a mistake isn't the main takeaway here. It's the fact that JD Vance is lying about deporting someone with temporary protected status, and that is terrifying. I'm going to leave it at that. Make sure you drop a like, drop some blue hearts, share this video. I'll see you all in the next one. Love each and every single one of you. Peace out.